Hi, I'm Lisa Ohlen Harris, and I'm a prose writer, except for 10 years ago when I attempted to write my first poem. And I think it was about love and longing, and my husband looked over my shoulder on the computer, and he said, "Are you writing a spoof on poetry?" Delete the file, empty the trash. I was done with that. But when I moved to Newburgh 5 years ago, I was invited to join a writing group. My friend Lynn Otto is the leader and part of that group. And this group had about half poets, half prose writers. So I thought it was a good fit. But gradually, these hybrid prose poetry writers became all poetry writers, or left, and new poets came, and I was surrounded by poets. And I stayed because they wrote some good poetry. And they wrote some bad poetry that 2 weeks later would be good poetry, which is really cool. It's fun to see the process. And I learned a lot from them, and I think I gave a lot to the group. And as it ends up, I also received a lot, though I didn't realize it at the time. I'm coming out of a really busy season. This last fall, I had 3 classes and 2 tutorials, plus freelance editing. I'm an adjunct, so I work harder sometimes than those who work full-time. And I also had rejoiced in the release of my second book, but I tell you, any writing I did this fall was about book publicity or a blog post or an interview, and I wasn't really writing, and I wasn't sure what I would do next. And then Barbara invited me to be part of this reading and to read a poem of William Stafford's and a poem in the spirit of William Stafford. And I thought, well, I'm totally reading prose. There's no way I'm going to have a poem to read. But, you know, if it's short, it can be a prose poem. But I went to the library and got a bunch of William Stafford books so that I could figure out what the spirit of William Stafford was. And I started reading William Stafford poems. So the poem that I'm going to read of William Stafford's is a prose poem, or it looks like it to me on the page, Something That Happens Right Now. I haven't told this before. By our house on the plains, before I was born, my father planted a maple. At night, after bedtime, when others were asleep, I would go out and stand beside it and know all the way north and all the way south. Air from the fields wandered in. Stars waited with me. All of us ached with a silence, needing the next thing, but quiet. We leaned into midnight and then leaned back. On the rise to the west, the radio tower blinked. So many messages pouring by. A great surge came rushing from everywhere and wrapped all the land and sky. Where were we going? How soon would our house break loose and become a little speck lost in the vast night? My father and mother would die. The maple tree would stand right there. With my hand on that smooth bark, we would watch it all. Then my feet would come loose from earth and rise by the power of longing. I wouldn't let the others know about this, but I would be everywhere, as I am right now, a thin tone like the wind, a sip of blue light, no source, no end, no horizon. I was fortunate enough to be selected for an artist residency this last week on Orcas Island in the San Juans. And so I took my William Stafford with me, just in case, and I had to decide what to read. And as I drove north on I-5, I felt like I drove into my childhood, into my past. My mom is from Tacoma. My dad is from Edmonds on the Puget Sound. And I met with a high school girlfriend of mine who now lives on Lummi Island, which is near Bellingham. And so as I thought about that, I thought, that's what I'm going to write about when I get to the residency. And when I sat down to write, what came out of my fingers and onto my computer was, I thought, maybe poetry. And I wrote 2 poems in the morning the first day and 2 poems in the afternoon. And so the next day I thought, okay, that's my rhythm, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And I think I got 3 the second day, and I sent them to my friend Lynn, and I said, I think these might be poetry. And Lynn wrote back and she said, well, 2 of them might be poetry. And so I fiddled. This is still malleable. It's still in process, but it's a privilege to read you something that's not about whiskers or love or longing, I don't think. Driving north on I-5. Past the volcano whose blast I heard at 16. Ash fall on our lawn, on our cars. Then the stories came of blinded campers crawling out, homes made into houseboats splintered by the mud flows, Harry Truman and his cats. In Tacoma, I stopped for lunch. Woolworth is gone, where Grandma took me to buy my first earrings. North through Seattle, fish and salt-scented Pike Place Market, Dungeness delight at the Crystal Tea Room, nothing too good for Auntie's little guests. To the West Edmonds, the Puget Sound, wind whipping my pigtails on the Kingston Ferry, cocoa in a paper cup warms my hands, burns my tongue. I-5 behind me now. Ahead, the Salish Sea. The bright sun reflects off the San Juan Ferry, so white it pierces my eyes. The first time without my father. At the ticket gate, I make a U-turn, drive back to town. An old friend waits for me. In 2 hours, we skim 30 years and head to our different islands. First timer, I tell the woman at the gate. Good choice, she says, line 3 for Orcas. I pull into line and turn off the ignition. The 3:35 is late, and already the light is failing.